Hi guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to write classes in VBA, and it should help you understand the Excel object model if you don't really understand that, and it'll also be pretty fun. We're going to make it fun. Before we do that, go to Excel VBA SQL, watch 37 hours of video on Excel or VBA. You could become advanced in Excel or VBA if you just watch those videos. You can read the tutorial on VBA here for more clarification. If you want to go from beginner to advanced really fast, take this online course. It's live. It'll be taught by me and you'll learn a ton. So let's get started. We want to talk about classes in VBA. So I want to show you where you're going to write classes. Before, we're used to going to the toolbar, inserting these modules, and writing subroutines like this, sub, test, whatever, right? Now we want to write classes, so we have to insert a class module. So we go to the toolbar, just like before, but now we select the class module. And now we have a folder here for class modules. And now let's briefly just talk about what a class is. So a class is just a blueprint for an object. That's all it is, a blueprint for an object. Get that in your head. Write it down. A class is a blueprint for an object. Okay, so what is an object? An object is anything you see around you in the real world, in the imaginary world, whatever. You can make it anything. The object could be anything. When you're writing VBA, you are using objects that Microsoft developers allow you to use. Like, you know, if you do something like this in a module over here, application.name, that is an object. This right here is an object. This is an application object. Okay? And as part of its definition, it has a property called name. So that's the object model, and you already know it, even though you don't really know it maybe, because you've been writing VBA code or you've been looking at VBA code. So this is the object model. Here's an object. Here's its property. So let's get deeper into this. Let's create a class that defines an object, and in our case, our class is going to define a basketball team. So the object we're defining is a basketball team, so I want to name my class basketball team. So I'm going to go to the properties window. I'm going to move it over so you can see. And I'm going to click on this class 1. Instead of naming it class 1, I want to make it more descriptive because this class is going to define a basketball team. So I'm going to put basketball team. So now I have a basketball team class. Now I have to define that class. In the same way that, you know, the definition of this application object has a property called name, I want to, you know, my basketball team should have a name too. So I want to have a property in this class that is called name. So let's do that. Before we do that, I'll just write out the definition of a class. A class equals blueprint for an object. It also can be called AKA, also known as the definition of an object. And a class, you know, when you define something, when you make a blueprint for this object, a class contains properties, subroutines, functions, or events. So when I talk about a blueprint, I'm really talking about the properties, the subroutines, the functions, or the events of this object that we're defining. So a class is just really all a class is a bunch of properties, subroutines, functions, or events that are all grouped in a certain into some code here, and that code is the class name. So here's our class name. Now I want to make some properties. And like I said before, I want a name property for my basketball team. So how do I create that? So let's start writing code here. I'm going to do option explicit, so I have to name all my variables. And then I'm going to create a variable called team name. And it's going to be a string variable. And then I'm going to do, okay, so this private variable, the reason it's private is because I only want it to be used in this class. So that's why I have private. If I put public here, then this module can access it, other things can access it, where I only want this class to access it. Okay, so now let's start writing the class. Let's start defining our object, our basketball team. I want to define our basketball team with a property called name. So to do that, I do this: public property, and then I do get name as string. And as soon as you hit enter, you get this end property that comes up, just like we've seen before when writing subroutines and functions. And what this does is this is going to return the name of our team. So this is going to return the name of our team. That's what this get means, right? So we have a property. It's called name, but you need this get here to further define this property. This get is saying, when you want the team name, you're going to have to use this property, this get property. Actually, this get name property. But it's the name of it is just name. So we'll see in a second how this looks when we write code. And all we want to do here is set the name equal to team name. So what this does, that's part of our property. This is our property called name that will return the name to us. But this doesn't set the name. This doesn't allow us to set the name. So to do that, I'm just going to copy this. And we need to do something here called let. And this let is going to allow us to set the team name. So if we want to name our team the Chicago Bulls, you need to have this let modifier next to your property name. And the reason it's red here is because, watch. Let me do that again. The reason that we got an error when I put let in here is because it says argument is required. That's because you need, when you're assigning the name, you need to pass something through it. So I'm going to put param underscore name as string, and I'm going to get rid of this. Oops. And now instead of returning the name, this is going to set the name. And when we set the name, we are going to do the opposite of what we did above, and it's going to be, our private variable called team name is going to equal whatever name we pass in. Param underscore name. So, guys, we just defined a class, and we could stop there if we wanted to. That's it. That's what a class is. This is a class. A class defines an object. What is our object? Our object is a basketball team. Okay. How does it define it? Well, it defines it using properties, subroutines, functions, or events. What are we doing here? We're using a property. We're defining it with a property. What's the name of our property? The name of our property is name. Why are there two things here? Why is there this public property get name and public property let name. That's because there's really two actions when you have a property. You can set the property, which this does, or you can retrieve the property, which this does. And the reason that there's two is because sometimes you want to handle those two instances differently. When you set the property, you might want to do some stuff, but then when you get the property, you might want to do some other stuff. So let's see how this works in the real world when we go to use it in VBA. So remember, we have a basketball team class now, and it has a property in it called name. And if we go back to this, I'm just going to comment this out. And now we could start writing our code. We could start using this new class that we created. And how do we do that? Just like when you declare a variable, you could do dim BB team as basketball team. Notice that this basketball team is already registered in the object browser. Wow. You know, here I didn't even finish writing it, and it's in this little drop-down list. So if I click on it, there it is. But why was it there? It's because as soon as you write this class here, it's registered in the object browser. So if I go to the object browser up here, you know, this has all the objects that you can possibly work with. And if you look at the VBA project library up here, you see this class called basketball team. And within it, you see two things: the members of the basketball team class. And here's the name property that we just wrote. You know, public property name as string. And there's another member in there called team name, and that's our private variable, private team name as string. And you know, there's the class VBA project.basketball team. There's our VBA project, there's basketball team, right? So it's, as soon as we write this code in here, it's registered in the object browser. And the thing to note is that you can see all these objects, and like I said before, if you go to VBA project, there it is. There's our class right there. Okay, so now we could start using our class to make an object. So where is our object here? Well, we're almost there. The distinction between an object and a class is that an object is an instance of a class. So what does that instance mean? Instance mean the instant you start, the instant you do this, you are putting something on your computer's memory, and that's when it becomes an object. Well, actually, it doesn't become an object until this line right here. So when you set this BB team as basketball team, oops, well, you gotta assign it to a new basketball team. Okay, so this is where it becomes an object. An object is born. Oh, I should. Okay, so this is where an object comes into existence. When I say an object is an instance of a class, that's exactly what this line means. It means this object here is an instance of this class. And why is it this line, not this line? It's because this line actually takes up space on your computer's memory. So now, on your computer's memory, some space is allocated for this basketball team object. And how big is that space? How much of your hard drive is being taken up? Well, whatever is going on in here. You know, there's a string variable that takes up space, and if there were other variables in here, it would take up space as well. But the point is, a basketball team object is born in this line here. Okay, so now that we have our BB team, if I write some code like this, bb team dot name, you know, BB team dot. Look what happens. Now I can access that name property. And if I do name, I could set it equal to something. Equal to the Lakers. Okay? Now, why is there only one thing here? There's only one name property here. Whereas in the object browser, we saw that there were two, right? There's two members. There's a name and then team name. Why don't I see team name over here when I put the dot? That's because team name was private, right? So if I go here and I look at team name, this says private, whereas this other one says public. So remember, this says private, and this property, the name property, is public. That's why I see that name property here, but I can't see team name. The other thing to note is, well, let's just run this. Let me put a message box thing here. Message box, bb team dot name. So if I run this, I get Lakers in a message box. But now let's step through it to see what's actually going on. As soon as I do this, set bb team equal to new basketball team, I have my object. My object is my basketball team object, which is an instance of the basketball team class. And if I step through, what happens is, the first thing that happens is, you know, in this line here, I'm setting the name of my team. So it knows that. In that line, it knows that that's the property I want. I want to actually use the let component of the property. So I fall into this public property let name. And the parameter name that I'm passing through, as you can see, is Lakers. And I'm setting this variable team name equal to that. So now if I go up here and put a watch on this, this private variable team name is now Lakers. And then I step through, and what happened right there is that let property took Lakers and it put it into that private variable team name. Now when I go to retrieve it, watch what happens. In this line, I want to retrieve it. So I click on here, and it's using the other one, the get name, right? So it's retrieving it, it's returning it. And if I step through, you know, team name is Lakers from before. You know, the first time it set the name here, Lakers became the value of this team name variable. The next time when I go to put it in a message box, it has to go get the name. So it uses this part of the property up here, this public property get name. They're the same property, but just there's two different components, or however you want to describe it. There's one part of the property sets the name, the other one returns it. So now I can return it by just taking the team name here and assigning it to name. And it's just like a function. You know, go watch my videos on functions, and it's, you know, the name of my property is being assigned something. So here's the name of my property, which is name, and it's being assigned whatever in team name. And so now, you know, when that property's done, I see Lakers in a message box. So this uses, I can stop this now. So I'll just, to be clear for you, what we just saw was that that line uses that, and this line uses this property. Uses the name property with let. So this line uses the name property with let so that it can assign it something, and this line uses the name property with get. And this is very similar to what's happening when you do something like this. Message box, application, dot name. All this code up here, we wrote ourselves. We created a class for a basketball team that defines a basketball team with one property. Here's our property name. And we use that team variable as private so that outside stuff can't change the team name. That's why it's private. So that if you're wondering why this is private, it's because other code sitting over here maybe, or any other, if we had other code, you couldn't touch this. You have to use these properties to touch the team name. Okay? So we saw that all this code we wrote, we wrote a class that has a property, and then we were able to assign to that property and then retrieve the value in that property using the name property with let and the name property with the get. And it's very similar to what is already given to us by Microsoft when you open up Excel. There's all kinds of stuff. If you do application dot, you see all these properties, right? And these are sub-procedures or functions, and you see events, and on and on and on. But that's what's going on in VBA when you're coding stuff like this. This is built into Excel, and 99% of the time you're going to use this stuff. But in the depths of what's going on, it's similar to what you see here. You have properties being coded out and all that, but you don't need to worry about that, right? The reason for this video is to show you what a class is, but in actuality, you're probably not going to write many classes, because look how many classes there are in the object browser. If I move this down a bit, there's hundreds and hundreds of classes already written for you, and their members are sub-procedure. Every class has all these members. So here's a class that has these members, then this class has different members, and this class has many different members, and so on and so forth, right? So we added one more class to our VBA project. But there's already hundreds written for us, and that's what you use in VBA. So there is your first introduction to the Excel VBA classes. In the next video, we're going to expand on this, and we are going to create some more properties for our basketball team class, and they're going to be more complex properties, which will help you understand the object model even better. So there's your introduction to what is a class, and how you write it, and so on and so forth, and how you access the properties of that class. And if you have questions, go to excelvbasql.com, sign up for this online class at the end of the month, watch all the videos, or the tutorials. Let me know. Feedback is important. Thanks. Bye.